I want you to think that I'm interesting and smart and kind and funny, and virtuous and good. And that's very human, that's very normal. But if I do that, if I'm performative, I might succeed in getting you to like me, right? I might succeed in getting you to admire me. A version of me, right? Of course, that's a problem. But I'm not going to forge a connection. I'm not going to feel loved. I'm not going to make you feel loved because you don't really know me.
Tell me what you think about AI.
Well, you have 8 hours to talk about that?
I just wrote an article on this, so it's really top of mind. And one of the risks I said was related to the movie Her, where this guy falls in love with an operating system, an AI called Samantha. Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Weeks. Welcome to the Bounce Podcast. My guest today is Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky. Sonja is a distinguished professor of psychology at the University of California, Riverside, and one of the world's leading researchers in the science of happiness and human flourishing. She is the author of the best-selling books, The How of Happiness and The Myths of Happiness, published in 39 countries. And her latest book, written with Harry Reese, was just released this past February and is titled How to Feel Loved. Sonja's research on happiness has been the recipient of many grants and honors, to include the prestigious Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, an Honorary Doctorate from the University of Basel, the Diener Award for Outstanding Mid-Career Contributions in Personality Psychology, the Christopher Peterson Gold Medal, and the Faculty of the Year Award. She also writes a popular bi-monthly newsletter I highly recommend on the science of happiness. And her work is frequently featured in print media, TV, podcasts like this one, and feature documentaries across the world. I really enjoyed talking with Sonja. It was a wide-ranging conversation that spanned everything from self-help culture, happiness, how to deepen relationships, and even, of course, AI. So, without further ado, I give you Sonja Lyubomirsky. I got my tea when you got yours. Yes. This is the seesaw. I'm doing it. So I'm recording, but this is the preamble. But I'm also trying to connect with you. I was reading your book. Okay. So I don't know her. We've just emailed.
Yeah, totally. We need to have a connection.
And I was trying to figure out so here I was going to ask you, let me see if this works.
Okay.
So how many of these kind of interviews about your book have you done? Like 100? Like it had to be a lot. So tell me how many.
Yeah. No, it's not 100. Okay. Maybe 30.
So after 10, do you get sick of talking about it? Or
no, well, actually, because they're all, I mean,
come on, you got to be honest.
I'm very honest, by the way. I mean, sometimes it's just that they're not that close together. I think if they were really close together, and I just find them very different. Not just the questions. Sometimes the questions are similar, but the energy of the person, the personality is so different. It really is. It's really the energy, like the vibe that is different with each one. So sometimes it's like kind of mellow and sometimes it's like high energy and fast. So I guess I'm saying surprisingly, I'm not getting sick of it. When I give talks, I do get sick of giving kind of the same talk, but maybe it's because I'm just talking. And yes, I'm feeding off the audience, and that could be a little different, but that's very different from a conversation, like a back and forth.
I read your book and I was like, oh, this would be a great time. And I think I do a good job of connecting because I do this. I do preambles.
Yeah.
A lot of times I leave it in because people say it's like the fly on the wall. They like to hear what's happening. Well, the other thing I thought, Sonja, was for me, sometimes when I'm talking to somebody, I want to impress them and I become more performative, which isn't the better interview. You know what I mean?
Which is exactly what I talk about in the book, right? But we're all trying to do that. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm trying not to do that, but I think for the most part, I succeed.
Like a lot of people are nervous. Anyway, you get the idea. It's actually interesting, how to feel loved is an interesting topic for podcasters because, kind of by definition, this is what podcasters are trying to do, right? Is to make a connection with the interviewee and they're having conversations. And my book is about conversations. So it's kind of almost like ironic that your job is to have conversations and you're interviewing me about a book about how to have conversations.
Yes, it's very meta. And I thought, this would be great. She would be a great guest to ask about this type of performative versus open, and I want to be more open. Also.
And that's just a barrier because I'll go on a date and I can see the guy's intimidated and it just doesn't work. You can't have a connection with someone who's intimidated by you. you have to get over that hurdle because we're all human, really. Like we're all the same. Thinking about the, astronauts, the Artemis mission, right? There are all these quotes from them. Like you look at this like tiny blue dot, right? And it makes you realize like we're all this little rock, and, we're all in the same boat, in the same rock. We're all human, we're all interdependent. So it makes you realize that when you're in space.
And this is part of what I want to talk about because the book is great. I'm going to point people to it. I'm going to have in the resources when I post this episode. I want to talk about this kind of performing versus connecting piece of it, but kind of to back up is shit. I just lost my train of thought. Damn it.
About performing versus connecting.
Damn it. It was going to be good. Whatever it was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe actually I can start talking about that because it's sort of one of the myths, like it's one of the misconceptions that we have. Like if I don't feel loved, I need to impress you more. I need to make myself more lovable, like show you how wonderful I am. And that's very human. And then especially when we first meet someone, whether it's a professional meeting or a date or a friend meeting, like I want you to think that I'm interesting and smart and kind and funny and, and virtuous and good. Again, that's very human. That's very normal. But if I do that, like if I'm performative, I might succeed in getting you to like me, right? I might succeed in getting you to admire me.
A version of me.
Yeah, a version of me, right? A version. That's the thing. That's the problem. But I'm not going to forge a connection. I'm not going to feel loved. I'm not going to make you feel loved because you don't really know me, right? Because the key is really to know the other person and for you to really know me, right? Because I can't really feel loved or really connected with you if you don't really know me, which is why, like, I was thinking today actually about sort of like celebrities where all these people really love them. But like, they can't really feel loved by maybe some of them. I mean, I'd love to ask them, how can they feel loved? Because these people don't know them, right? They love this sort of idealized image. One of my friends was hiking once and she met Paul McCartney on the hike. And they actually ended up kind of, running into each other several times because they were, I guess it was kind of, I don't know if it was a circular hike or something. And she finally got up the nerve and she was like, are you Paul McCartney? And she's like, I love you, I love the Beatles. She said, kind of funny. What do you say to Paul McCartney when you meet him?
You got to say that. Yeah.
It was kind of hilarious though. It's like the most, in some ways, the most inane thing to say. She says, I love the Beatles. He's like, thank you. But anyway, and it made me think though.
Look at you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it made me think that, like I love Paul McCartney too, but does he feel loved, by fans? I mean, I hope to some extent he does, but they don't really know him. They just love these pieces that they see,
Okay, you mentioned Paul McCartney. So let me ask you this, because we jumped right into it. So I'm going to back up and then jump back in. But did you really create a Spotify playlist, a happiness playlist for your classes?
I did. And the Beatles are on.
Because I couldn't find it. I was looking for it.
I can send it to you. It's funny. I should just I posted it on social media.
That's cool because I Spotify and I bike ride and I listen to tracks and playlists. So I was like, oh, great. I got to get this. So tell me if this is right. Does it have like good vibrations?
It does. In fact, that's the first week. So I teach a class called The Science of Well-Being. In fact, I'm teaching it right now. So actually, I have, I'm trying to think, we are family.
All right.
And they're by lecture, right? So they're by theme. So like the gratitude letter has sort of gratitude relevant songs, and gratitude lecture has gratitude letter relevant songs. The forgiveness lecture has songs relevant to forgiveness or apologies.
That's cool.
I just did a lecture on sort of how to be happier. So those were kind of a little bit more general. I have a lecture about sort of what contributes to happiness, like money versus relationships. So like one of this, I think Material Girl by Madonna is actually one of them. So anyway, I'll send it to you. I'll
send it to me. You don't remember off the top of your head for our audience. I'll put it in the resource links.
Well, which one?
The name of the playlist.
The name. Well, it's called Science of Well-Being. I'm just not even sure. I don't really use Spotify, so I don't know how to search it. Okay,
no worries.
I think it's called. I think if you search for Science of Well-Being, but I'll send you the link.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. That's cool. I thought it was great.
Yeah. And actually, when I posted it on Facebook, it literally got more likes than like anything I've ever posted.
You're a happiness expert, researcher. We're going to talk about your new book. And I told you I wanted to just quickly revisit some of the happiness stuff, but I think I'm going to disregard that, just jump into the book. But there are two questions I have for you related to happiness. By the way, I love your newsletter, your website, and the little articles you post. I love that.
Thank you. I love the newsletter too. Yeah.
They're snackable, but they're profound. Like, it's almost like a tactic a day or something, just an
Yeah,
insight.
it's only once every 2 weeks, so it's not too much. And it's all based on research, but I actually have people to help me to make it super accessible. So it's like very easy to read. Because even I'm a scientist, but when I read other people's newsletters or when I read like a New York Times article about research, if it's really dense and kind of hard to understand, like I might just put it down because whatever, I'd rather do something else. So I think being very engaging and accessible and easy to digest is really important.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about happiness in regards to relationship here, which is probably the whole ball of wax. But two things, and I just got this off the internet about happiness that maybe you've written or said in the past. I'm not sure, but it's about finding a project. Mm-hmm. And I think the quote is, you find a happy person and you will find a project.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's from the How of Happiness. Actually, it's amazing. I remember that because I don't remember every sentence I've ever written. I think it's something like find a happy person. You'll find a project. A happy person always has something to look forward to around the corner. It's from the goals chapter in the How of Happiness. The How of Happiness is a book published, 2008. And it's about how to be happy. And it has 12 chapters. It's sort of divided to sort of 12 different kinds of happiness activities. By the way, there's probably 100 activities we can do to be happier, but, sort of 12 categories. One of them is pursuing significant, meaningful life goals. And so having a project, having something to look forward to, something that you're working on, something that's meaningful to you, absolutely is associated with happiness.
Is it, intuitively, I know that to be true. But why is it true? Is it the goal-seeking behavior? Is it some form of purposeful behavior? Or is it the progression of completing things like I've done something today? Or is it all the above?
That's a great question. I've never actually been asked that question. I think it is all of the above. We know lots of research from Mike Steger and others, that show that having purpose and meaning is very important, right? So having something to work toward and pretty much any kind of project actually can be reframed as related to purpose. So for example, there's a study that interviewed, for example, hospital cleaners. So there were people who literally cleaned hospital rooms and a third of them basically reported having purpose and meaning in that job. They felt like they had a calling to make the lives of the patients of the hospital better, and more interesting and go better so they can heal faster. So that's, that it would seem to be hard to create purpose out of that, but you can. But anyway, so that's definitely part of it. So having some kind of structure in your life, something that gets you up, up in the morning and, gets you to do things, obviously that also contributes to it. And then you mentioned goal progress. We know that, every step of, you take baby steps and every step of the way, we feel a sense of accomplishment and competence, agency that makes us feel good. The downside is, we adapt to achieving a goal. And so, we sort of achieve a goal and then we're like, okay, happy for a little while. Then we're like, okay, now what next? And so we're constantly kind of looking for more. And so that's where kind of trying to enjoy sounds like such a cliche, but trying to enjoy the journey, right, is more happiness, associated with more happiness than just only pursuing that end goal. Because we'll always want more. And others argue that it's evolutionarily adaptive for humans to always want more, right? Imagine that if we were just satisfied with like the first step, we just kind of stagnate, right? We just sort of sit there. We'd sit sort of on top of that hill where we find some food and then we're like, okay, we're satisfied. We don't want any more. We might not survive, actually. So human beings kind of have always advanced, always progressed because we're not satisfied with every goal we want to achieve the next goal.
I found, and then this last one here, I just read on your website, it is gold. And I want to talk about. So gratitude has always been this not difficult, these gratitude practices of think of something you're grateful for in the day. And when it comes to habituation, it's just hard to take things for granted. You really got to give it some thought. And then gratitude bubbles up. But this is unique. And I haven't read this before. So you wrote about gratitude and it's encapsulate it in this sentence. Think back on your last week and ask yourself, what almost went wrong but didn't. That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because, I've accidentally done it with other people like, wow, can you believe the weather? This could have gone, it was supposed to rain, it didn't, or whatever, or some bad thing could have happened and it didn't, and you realize you were lucky. And it does make you do appreciate the moment even better. So, it's fantastic, that frame.
It's one way to experience gratitude, right? There's different ways, right? You could express gratitude for the good things in your life that did happen, or you already exist, like your health, or the fact that your child, got an A or something. But I thought it was interesting. This is actually in one of my newsletters, to focus on sometimes on the things that could have gone wrong. These are called counterfactuals in psychology. So, which is sort of the thing that could have happened.
It's also a tenet of Stoicism. They talk about the premortem and exactly.
Exactly. So I thought that was very interesting to think about the things that could have gone wrong. Now I should mention there's a caveat, is that it's important to do that for yourself, but sometimes it backfires when we do it for others, right? Because if someone's sort of like upset about something, to say, but it could have been so much worse, right? Then you're kind of invalidating their feelings a little bit. You're sort of minimizing what happened to them. So unless they welcome it, then you want to be careful about doing that for other people.
All right. Thank you for that. And it's great. I'm writing that down. That's a good reminder. So I want to talk about happiness in the sense of connection, relationships, and your new book. Your book made me think it's possible that the general happiness movement, a very positive thing to think about and research, and we have all these books on it, but is it possible that the happiness movement accidentally made us a little too self-obsessed to actually be happy? And I'm talking about a risk of optimization solipsism, the idea that happiness is a solo sport and you win by fixing yourself.
Yeah, I think it contributed to that, but I'd like you to consider the opposite causal direction. Is we've already kind of obsessed with happiness, and the happiness movement is more of a symptom, right? Of a symptom of that, or a consequence of that. But I think it certainly makes it worse. There's a little bit of a vicious cycle, right? So I think, one theory is that you look at the Western world, like the United States and Western world, a lot of people, not everyone by any means, a lot of people have reached a level of sort of stability or comfort, not wealth necessarily, but just sort of comfort, that they have the luxury to think about their own happiness, right? So they can, they're not sort of trying to survive.
And by the way, this is what I want to talk to you about it, because anything starts with me. It is an inside job, but
Absolutely.
But if I stay there, that's my wonder about.
Yeah, absolutely. So sort of to give some context, right? So now a lot of us have the luxury to kind of ponder our own happiness and think about, can I become happier? What can I do to become happier? And so I think we've started doing that more and more. And then maybe sort of articles appeared about happiness and videos and books. And there's always been books. For a long time, there have been books about happiness. The self-help literature is pretty old, So I think I would probably agree with you that the self-help movement sort of feeds into that desire or almost obsession to be happier, and kind of maybe makes it, amplifies it.
There is the internal me work, but the cash value, it seems, of that work, if it does not result in pushing you to relationships or quality connections or better connections with others, is it a form of psychological hoarding, all things being equal?
Yeah. Very interesting question. I remember someone telling me about how they were helping a friend move. And so they were moving her books. So they were packing her books, and maybe they don't know her that well, or they didn't know her well enough. And they were packing these books, and they were all self-help books, right? So they're putting them in boxes, and there are more and more and more and more of them. And they realized that this woman just had like shelves and shelves full of self-help books. And so this person was almost laughing. He's like, well, clearly they're not working, right? Because she keeps buying more, right? Like if you read a book about how to be happy, and it, quote, works, and the person becomes happier, they don't need to buy another book about how to be happy, kind of like dieting, right? You diet. But I think maybe that's just not how life works, that hopefully we're constantly working on ourselves, and there's always more to work on. I'm maybe a little bit of a defense of people who are constantly sort of searching and, buying more different kinds of different kinds of philosophies and practices and trying different things. And I certainly know people who go to lots of workshops.
You should see I'm her. You should see my bookshelf.
That's her. Well, you're also a podcaster. But anyways, so I guess a counter argument is, like, as you said, maybe you just learn how to connect better with other people and then you're fine and then you're good. You don't need to buy any more books or go to any workshops. I have friends who go to lots of workshops and I wouldn't call them unhappy. I think they're just really evolving people. They're into sort of self-development and growth. Yeah. And I feel like there's always some way we can grow. And so, like, I'm very good at connecting with people, and yet there's more I can learn. There's more I can do, Getting to my book, one of the chapters in the book is about curiosity. I think I'm pretty good at curiosity, but I could be a lot better, right? So I'm working on it. Sometimes I'm talking to people and I'm like not curious about them, And so I want to work on that more. So there's always more we can work on.
And these books, what's interesting I found, because I'll reread, I highlight, I'll reread. I'll find that there's whole sections of books I really didn't get the first time I read it, or I wasn't ready to get it, or whatever, that when I reread, I'm like, holy shit, I missed that. That's good. So it's almost like, I don't know.
Right. There's more you can digest. There's more you can see.
You can only get X depending on where you were in a given.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to get into relationship because I need some help from you on clarifying. I understand the concept of many people treat feeling loved as something that happened to them, or they think it's a passive outcome of luck or having a lovable personality. And the book kind of flips that script. So I want to dig into it and just clarify it and then get into the vulnerability piece. One of the things that struck me, because I always like myths or updating information, are love languages a myth, or is it there's just one universal love language?
Yeah, it's a fun part of the book. We kind of we kind of debunk the idea of love languages. Some people think if only I could find the person who speaks my love language, then I'll feel loved, right? Sort of one of the myths of if I'll feel loved if I find someone who speaks my love language. I love the idea of love languages. I think they're a fun heuristic, kind of a fun...
I got to learn your language in order for me to...
It's sort of a fun topic. I talk about love languages all the time. I think it's a fun topic. Again, it's sort of a heuristic, a shortcut to conversation, to thinking about relationships. But this idea that, first of all, that there's 5 love languages, there's a lot more than 5. There might be 10, there might be 30. I don't know. That's a myth. That's 5 love languages. Turns out there are 2 love languages that pretty much all of us care about the most. So it's not that we're so unique that for me it's one thing, for you it's something else. There's 2 love languages that are kind of the most popular for everyone. And those 2 love languages are, do you know what they are? You might, if you read my book.
Words and service, right?
Close. Words of affirmation and quality time. So we all want, it makes sense. Like, we all want quality time. We all want to hear good things from others, right? Words of affirmation. So those are top 2 for everyone. And then the last thing, what turns out to be not true, not supported by evidence, is this idea that if you and I, Larry, match in our love languages, that somehow that's going to make our relationship better or more durable or sort of more likely. That turns not to be true. That turns out not to be true.
That's a big deal because that's almost like, I remember when I went on a date with this person who, she was an engineer, but she was into the Myers-Briggs. And oh my gosh, she knew everything. And it was all about the Myers-Briggs. And it was a disaster relationship, but I was supposed to be her ideal. Our fit was supposed to be amazing. And I was like...
But Myers-Briggs is another measure.
Right. That was the deep...
Not really supported by evidence. Yeah.
Somebody said it was horoscope for people on LinkedIn or something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So briefly explain the concept, and it's in the title of the book. People want to feel loved. And the book is kind of how to architect that in a sense. And the seesaw is part of that.
Yeah. So I started to keep the book on my desk. So it's called How to Feel Loved. And it turns out that many of us are loved. You've alluded to this, Larry. Many of us are loved, but we don't necessarily feel loved, right? And so we actually did a survey expressly for the book, and we found that 70% said that they would like to feel more loved in at least one relationship in their life. I actually think that number is an understatement. I bet it's more than that. And 40% reported wanting to feel more loved by their romantic partners, which is very high too. So there's a difference between being loved and feeling loved. And so the book is really about how to go, if you don't feel loved enough, what to do, how to feel more loved, sort of by changing the conversations that you have. So it is really empowering. You were saying before how people sort of think it's luck, or, like maybe I'm not maybe I'm lovable, maybe I'm not lovable enough. But we have this line in the book that feeling loved is actually an empowering message, right? That if you want to feel more loved, you don't necessarily have to change yourself. By the way, it's always good to work on yourself, but it's not about changing yourself. It's not about changing the other person, somehow making them love you more. It's about changing the conversations that you have with that person, because a relationship really is a series of conversations.
Okay, help me parse that, because how to feel loved is an inside job. This is something I'm feeling, right? But you're in relationship to others, and it may be easy for somebody to blame someone else if they don't feel love from them. Let's say it's a spouse or somebody you're living with or a family member. It would seem to be easy to say, well, you don't make me feel loved. So one time I had a conversation with somebody and I said, what part would you say communication is? 50-50 or 80-20? Speaker, listener? So it help me with my analytical mind of this, because I don't want to burden somebody. I don't want to burden somebody to say, okay, now it's your responsibility to make me feel loved.
Yeah. And yet it is in part, but it's sort of taking responsibility, but it's not that we're not saying I'm blaming you if you don't feel loved enough. By the way, sometimes you really are not loved by this other person, right? So it's really not your fault. So we're really talking about situations where you are loved, but you don't feel loved, right? And so in those cases, why is that the case? And so we talk about what to do in that case. Actually, I had an experience like this with a family member where I was not feeling as loved by her as I wanted to. And so actually what we say in the book is if you don't feel loved enough, the first step is you go first, is to make the other person feel loved. So actually I thought about it. I'm like, because first I thought, I don't know, what am I doing wrong? How do I present or change myself so that I'm loved more? But I followed the instructions of the book, which is not the instructions. I followed the kind of the theme of the book, which is try to make the other person feel loved first. And so I did. So I tried to find out what really makes her tick and show interest in her inner world and really listen to her. So this is kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Our book talks about 5 different mindsets that to embrace if you want to make someone else feel loved or if you want to make yourself feel loved. And the first one is curiosity, is to really show curiosity in the other person. So I was thinking about this person, this family member, what does she really care about? What interests her? Turns out in that case, she's really interested in health information, health blogs, health podcasts. So I thought, okay, let me myself, look into this, sort of do some research myself and then ask her, tell her I read this article and I thought it was interesting about health. What do you think about that? And then that got her really excited. And so it made her feel seen, right, and heard and understood because I was showing curiosity in her inner life. And then when she started talking, then I started to really listen, So one mindset we talk about is called listening to learn. But we really listen like we're just taking it in, like we're watching a movie. We're just trying to learn, not try to rehearse our own answer or try to fix whatever they're talking about. And so those are 2 examples.
So what was the result of that? Now
I think it worked. I mean, it's still a work in progress. We did have a closer connection. And the idea is that she would then reciprocate. The idea is that most people reciprocate. So you show curiosity in them, you listen to them, help them tell their story. And reciprocity is one of the strongest norms of social behavior, right? It's very hard not to reciprocate, right? Mostly. That's why the Hare Krishna, remember, used to come to airports back before 9/11 where you could go to the gate, without a ticket, and they would hand you a flower. It's really hard not to then give them what they're asking for because you feel like you want to reciprocate. Anyway, so the idea is that she reciprocated, and that she shows curiosity in me and then listens to me when I tell my story. So that's sort of the dynamic that we're talking about.
So I wanted to kind of get here, and we're here. This is perfect because you argue in the book that felt love only happens when we stop performing and actually get vulnerable. Do I have that right? By the way, there were some deathbed regrets I had never read before. I mean, one was, I wish I'd lived my true self. I've read that many places and what have you. And the other was, I wish I'd expressed my feelings.
Yeah. The top five.
Wow. That was, I don't know, that struck me.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. So this is from this famous book, right? Regrets of the Dying. Yeah. So the number one really is I wish I'd lived the life that I chose to live as opposed to the life others expected of me, which is really which is really about authenticity, right? And really sharing your story with others. And yeah, I wish I had expressed my feelings more, which is really relevant to what we call the sharing mindset, which is to share with others. And the idea is, and this is actually really, really important, that the key to feeling loved is being known, right? So I can't really feel, and we've kind of already alluded to this, Larry, I can't really feel loved by you if you don't know me. Because if you show love, what are you loving? Like this piece of me, only the piece of me that I'm showing to you, which is maybe only the positive side of me. And so the sharing mindset is really important. The sharing mindset means showing more of my full self, more of my sort of true self, if you will, to you. Then when you express love to me, then I'll really trust it, then it'll be truly unconditional, right? Because unconditional love is, right, you love me even after I show vulnerability, even after I show my weaknesses.
I don't know if it's Brene Brown. There's some saying out there, you probably know it, about people only love you for your vulnerabilities, not for your perfection. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
That seems to be true based on the research.
Yeah, it's like, and also it's called the vulnerability paradox in psychology, which is that we think that people will like us less if we show vulnerability, but actually people like us more. Now, it has to be done at the right time, at the right place, at the right pace, right? You don't just sort of let it all hang out right away, because
you can't let it hang out right away.
Not right away, right? We don't want to overshare, right? I mean, that's sort of obvious. You have to read the room. There's emotional intelligence is involved, right? As it is in everything. Some interesting examples. One example that I always go to is John F. Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs disaster, went on TV and admitted that he had made a mistake. So that is showing vulnerability, right? So, and his approval ratings shot up after he admitted that he made a mistake. So now maybe that doesn't relate to you and me necessarily, but I think it does. And another example I just heard recently, it was a screenwriter who said, when you're writing a screenplay, if you want to write a character that no one connects to, make them perfect.
Oh, wow. So, that's good.
Yeah. Is that a great line? It's like, it's basically a similar idea, right? We just don't connect to people who are perfect.
You just reminded me, there's a show on HBO we just finished watching, a series called DTF St. Louis.
What is that? I love TV, tell me.
It's really good. So Jason Bateman, I should have wrote down the other actors.
Yeah.
So the only actor that I really knew was Jason Bateman, I think. But the other actor who, to me, who's the star of this show, his performance, this guy, he does this dance, he's in his underwear, his body is a mess, he's overweight, but he is free as a bird in this scene. And I remember thinking, Sonja, this guy's going to win some kind of award for this performance because he is just letting it all hang out. I mean, and he was this lovable, like you could really identify with him. I thought it must have been so hard for him to film this but he did and was brave. This character just really resonates. And it was all about vulnerability.
And Brene Brown actually makes this point that vulnerability requires courage. It requires courage, right? So, yeah, that's beautiful.
So the other thing I thought, I'm reading the book, is that there is a huge psychological weight dropped if people would get over this performative pull we all have versus just being open. If they could just drop the mask and realize that's the better tactic if you want to connect versus trying to impress, that a lot of people will be happier, regardless of the connections, which those should follow. But I'm just saying, just that weight, because people are worried. They're worried all the time about what people think of them.
Exactly. Absolutely. There's some nuances here, right?
Okay,
so
please.
It's very natural and human to want to impress. And so we are impressed, right, by good qualities, right? So when you first meet someone, maybe the first few things you see about them, I think it's a good idea that they're positive things, but maybe mixed with a little bit vulnerability. If it's all just like this mask, that doesn't work. But I think it's, but if the first thing, if you go on a date and the very first thing you say to your date is like, oh, I was so nervous and I threw up before I got here, like that's not going to work, right? So Saying I'm a little nervous right away is okay, because that's a sort of mild kind of vulnerability. Maybe a little nervous, but combined with you look attractive and you make a joke. So it's a balance.
Yeah, you talk about a minimum disclosure. So if there's someone who's very highly private or maybe low sharing.
Just start small. Start small. Or what I say is someone says to you, how are you? You instead of saying fine, like we do 99% of the time, right? You might say, oh, fine. I had a little bit of a rough morning this morning, right? Something, or, say a little bit, at least a little, share a little bit at first, and then gauge that person's reaction, right? This is, again, emotional intelligence is needed. Reading the room is needed, right? How are they reacting? Like, do they seem curious about like how your morning went? Should you say more? Or are they, I don't know, or are they changing the subject? So you need to sort of constantly be reading the other person's cues.
I love the boomer asking, asking a question only to immediately turn the answer back to yourself.
Well, you're really asking the question because you want to answer the question, right? And maybe we've already done that. Like you want to know, like you say, hey, what's the first concert you ever went to, when you were younger? Like, what was your first concert experience? And really, you want to tell your story about your first concert experience, but you ask the person that, hoping that they'll say, well, what about you?
Well, there's a judicial use of that, right? You could use it if you want to bring up a subject to get right. Okay.
Again, everything, that's what I'm saying. There's nuance in everything. Nothing is black and white. It's not like, oh, you should never boomer ask, right? I think the idea behind boomer asking is that you really are not interested in the other person's answer. You really just want it.
That's how I read that.
But if you have some interest in the other person's answers too, which presumably you should, if you're really interested, if you love concerts, you might actually. I'm using this example because I remember going to a brunch. I think it was like an Easter brunch. Yeah, people were talking about their very, very first concert experience. It was really fun. It was really fun to go around the table, to talk about that. But if you're only interested in your own story, then that's not so great.
Tell me what you think about AI.
Well, okay. Do you have 8 hours to talk about that?
I just wrote an article. I just wrote an article on this, so it's really top of mind. And one of the risks I said was related to the movie Her, where this guy falls in love with an operating system, an AI called Samantha.
We know people are falling in love with chatbots.
And there are specific chatbots made for this kind of relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so fascinating. Again, I try to have a more nuanced approach to this. You won't be surprised to learn. I do think that I hope that AI chatbots are not going to replace actual in real life, human connection. I don't think they can. Yet, for some people, for some of the time, it can be very beneficial. One example is I read a New Yorker article about loneliness, and they were talking about people who are using AI chatbots. And it says something like, those of you who throw shade at, make fun of people who fall in love with or who have these companions, AI companions, you have never been really lonely. And that really hit me. Like, there are people who really benefit from these companions. So it's not necessarily about falling in love. It could be just having a good friend.
Well, Sonja, you say feel love, you want to be seen. Mm-hmm. AI has data on you and it knows you.
AI is the best listener you will ever have in your life, right? Because it remembers everything you've ever said. And it does kind of quote, it makes you feel understood. Maybe it sort of hijacks that part of your brain that makes you feel loved. I don't really trust it if it says, I love you.
It's empty. It's empty. There's nothing.
But, yet it's still kind of, the other example.
It's the illusion. It's the illusion of.
Okay. But Larry, when you go see a movie and you cry and you're scared and you're excited, right? It's not real. And yet you have those very real emotions. And so I think it's a little bit similar. Our brain gets kind of hijacked by sort of thinking it's real. And so there's a time and a place for that for those AI companions, certainly between therapy sessions, right? People might rely on, AI companions, AI therapists, right?
Hang on. I just want to, so you think based on the use, there's a place for this?
For some people, some of the time. Yeah, yes, absolutely.
When do you think it becomes isolating or?
Sure.
Is that if it becomes, if you start isolating, maybe is that the...
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we know it when we see it, just like with any addiction, right? I mean, there's a fine line. At what point are you addicted to a substance or to a sugar or to gambling or to sex, right? I hopefully, I'm not a clinician, but I think, probably there are guidelines for that. At what point is it actually impairing your relationships and your life? I mean, I'm just a big fan of sort of everything in moderation. I don't like to think it's sort of black and white, like, oh, we should never have an AI companion. And also I just see people who benefit from them. And sometimes it sort of annoys me. Like I have friends who seem to rely on chatbots like all the time. They sort of ask them lots of questions like all day long. And I'm like, why don't you just try to ask yourself those questions or ask a friend? And these are people, by the way, who have friends. And they're like, oh, I don't really want to bother my friends so much. So, I'm going to ask my companion.
Because you said it, it's always listening. And that's my worry, is that human relationships are messy. There's friction, there's rejection, and that's a part of the makeup of a give and take.
Absolutely.
I think I worry more for the younger generations than for ours.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think I'm just trying to be more nuanced.
No,
it was kind of scary to me. Yeah. I have 4 children, and I read somewhere, your children's first romantic relationship is going to be with a bot. And I was like, oh my God.
Shit, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Maybe it's not such also I'm an optimist, so I'm trying to think of the bright side. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe they can learn relationship strategies and they can learn communication and they can role play with a bot. There's a study that came out of China that found that these are women in China who are married. They were rehearsing conflict conversations with their husbands using a chatbot. And then those conversations, these are women who don't have much power in their relationship. And those conversations went better because they had someone to rehearse with. So that's a positive, effect. So again, I definitely worry about people using it too much. I do think, I kind of believe in the rule of thirds, that 1/3 of people probably are going to be harmed, are going to rely too much and to the detriment of their relationships, probably not have relationships. That's very, very sad. That's a lot of people in the world. If it's a third are going to have mixed effects. And then a third might really flourish and might use AI in ways that really help them thrive and flourish and succeed and be happy.
Look, I think of people who are isolated not because of their own actions, just because whatever circumstances, they're isolated. Yeah, I was thinking of Tom Hanks in, what's the movie? He was stranded on an island. Yeah. And Wilson became his companion, and it probably kept him from going crazy. So he talked to a soccer ball, right? It's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
right, but that's an extreme example, obviously. But there are people who are very lonely, or maybe they're very depressed or very introverted or suicidal, and that companion might really help them. But again, I just want to sort of look at the full spectrum of use. But overall, I definitely worry a great deal about people, especially young people, or people who don't have strong relationships already. And that, by the way, that trend was starting before AI became.
With digital.
Just with digital. Young people, there's a great article in the Atlantic called The Sex Recession, as opposed to a financial recession. It's a sex recession. There's basically been a sex recession among young people. Young people are not having sex, and there are all these interviews with them. This is before AI, saying, it's too hard. It's too hard to have sex to get to that, that place. I'd rather watch porn or just not do anything or play video games. So it's kind of incredible, right, to read that.
I'm going to wrap this up here, but I wanted to touch on one more thing with you, and that is I love the concept of the multiplicity mindset.
You asked.
Multiplicity mindset. And I wanted to ask you about the modular theory of mind, which is, I think yours is a social theory, but the evolutionary, there's this theory regarding that we have hardwired domain-specific adaptations like mate selection, survival, and these modules respond to circumstance. And so we have these many different selves in us. Is this similar to this?
I don't know if it's similar. I feel like the modular theory, it's more about how we survive and how we make our way through the world. The multiplicity mindset is really more about how we, the multiplicity mindset is really more about how we see other people, which of course is relevant. And in fact, I'll bring in evolutionary psychology. Sounds like you're a fan, and I'm a fan too. My theory is it's hardwired at us that it's evolutionarily adaptive for humans to be judgmental. That maybe in our ancestral past, we met a stranger, we needed to decide whether they're a friend or they're an enemy, right? A friend or foe. And so we were judgmental. And so that's human to be judgmental. And so to not be judgmental, we need to actually deliberately, with effort, with intention, override that kind of hardwired tendency. And so the multiplicity mindset is really about that. It's sort of overriding that tendency. It's looking at people in a very complex way. This idea that every person, every one of us, so me and you, are like a quilt of both positive and negative traits, experiences, behaviors, facets, and that not one part of that quilt defines us, right? So I might be kind sometimes, and sometimes I'm selfish, right? And sometimes I'm loyal and gentle, and other times I'm narcissistic or harsh, right? And those are all parts of me, and I'm sure you are too, right? We all have, have done good and bad things, and have had.
How many of us said, "How could I do that?" to ourselves?
Of course, we've all done those things. We've been thoughtful, but we've also been thoughtless. So to turn this multiplicity lens onto other people as well as onto ourselves is very important. And it's very, very, very hard. I think that's actually the hardest mindset of the ones we talk about, because this happens all the time. People say to you, can you believe, when you read in the newspaper, can you believe this person did this, right? And yes, it's terrible what they did, but sort of separating that behavior from other characteristics that they might have, that person who did that X bad thing might be a wonderful father or mother or worker or friend, a brother or sister. It's very, very hard to do. It's very hard for us to do that because we tend to be judgmental, all of us.
Yeah. We contain multitudes.
We do, but it's so hard to remind ourselves. Actually, I one time, a friend of mine, it was a guy, wrote something terrible on a text to a female friend. And so we saw the text and we were just horrified that he did that. Right? We're like, I can't believe he said that. Right? It's sort of that judgmental. And by the way, it's warranted. It's horrible what he said. And then we had to kind of step back. And I remember I was thinking about this guy, and I could see the little boy inside of him, or the teen boy inside of him, who was probably rejected by girls when he was younger, and something got triggered in him that led him to lash out. Now, it's not an excuse. It's not rationalizing his behavior. It's not condoning it, but it is showing some compassion, showing some understanding for where he's coming from. So yeah, if we all did more.
We are all in a domino chain of events and things and DNA. Yeah. And by the way, I just want to compliment you. You've helped me with, in the book, I think you talk about Michelangelo, this block of stone and chiseling and finding the good person in there. This was great. Sonja, thank you for coming on. Should I point people to your site?
So yeah, this is the book. And the best way to learn about it is just for the book website, which is just the title, howtofeelloved.com, howtofeelloved.com. We have a quiz that also will appear on that website, howtofeelloved.com, called the Mindset Quiz. And it's just 5 questions where people can learn which of the mindsets, curiosity, listening, sharing, multiplicity, which of them they're best at and which is they sort of are most need of improvement. So I think that's also, people find that quiz very useful. So if you haven't taken it, take it.
One of the things I really loved was that you talk about little micro moments of connection throughout the day by just talking to strangers and being open and how that increases happiness. I'm seeing that more and more. I'm reading that more and more in the research.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm teaching a class on Friday actually about that. It's sort of just like being a little bit more social with the people in your life, strangers, especially. Yeah, it sort of adds up. It adds up. It makes.
I do that all the time, and I feel it. I do it all the time, and it's just. But again, thank you. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for coming on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Larry. You did too.
Have a good one. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, do share it with your friends and on your social platforms. Big thanks to Sam Williams, my audio guy, and the beautiful bumper music you're hearing is Michael Petrovich's Bella Luna. For all my show notes or resource links, visit LarryWeeks.com, and we will talk again soon.